Hey, do you know Leah Ingram?
Hey, do you know la petite goth?
Oh, you know her by her government name.
Yes. Oh, the government name.
That's my birth certificate name.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
Oh, you follow her birth certificate online?
You don't find everyone you know's birth certificate online?
It has
of
its own
course.
Instagram. It's just pictures of my birth certificate in other places.
Yes. With the coffee of the day, the drink of the night.
Different angles, slightly.
Just a la petite. Out
There
on
it
the
is.
night.
Honestly, same.
Ooh, honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly,
Honestly, same. Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back to the podcast. This one is another unique one. It's a little bit of a different one. The topic for this episode is our dear friend Leah. You
Yeah,
hear that?
I'm unique, and what were the words that you just said?
Unique dear friend?
No.
Oh.
You said this episode is unique.
Yeah, it's unique.
Because I'm unique.
Because you're unique. And we're going to find out all the uniqueness
Yes.
about you. And what's funny is that I have done this once before with you on
Yeah.
another show at another point in time. But luckily it was long enough ago that I don't really
that
remember.
my past might have changed.
Yes.
And she actually just gives a totally different story this time.
I just my stories don't match up at all.
And she's
find
like,
out
so
for-
forget what you know.
For
Forget
what
it
you
now.
don't hear, you just made everything up.
It's
Now
what you don't
completely-
hear, so it's because it's not real.
You're like, yeah, no, you're not hearing the real thing.
That wasn't an improv cut.
Yeah, that wasn't the
Comedy
improv
podcast?
one? Was that,
Oh,
wait,
whoops.
which, I thought the Who's Life one was my actual.
I was wondering why she had an accent the whole episode.
That's the real you.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's who I really am.
Well, I guess we're going to really find out what your true story is, because whether we
That's
did
true.
it on another podcast years ago or not, we're going to do it again right now. But I also have a co-host for this one. I get a co-interviewer for this one
Yes.
who's also going to be digging into the stuff. So where do we begin other than, well, the beginning probably is.
Start with your birth. How
the
did you
best.
enter the world?
Yeah, what was it like? What's the first thing you saw?
A lot of lights.
Okay.
I was really confused. I was scared a lot.
Are you sure this
I
wasn't
cried.
an alien abduction?
It might have been. I mean, maybe we are the aliens the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it's a one and the same.
Maybe we
That's
are
for
the-
another episode.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we really the aliens? Is for another episode. Okay, so let's lay the actual groundwork. Take me back. Where did you grow up? What was growing up like? Lay the foundation for us.
So I grew up in Menor, Ohio. I lived there pretty much my entire young adult life up until moving to Columbus. So most of everything took place in up by the lake, Northeast Ohio, Cleveland vibes. I'm the youngest cousin. I'm the youngest sibling. So of all of my family, I was the last one until my cousins started having kids and so on.
Is there
and so
an
forth.
age gap? What's the biggest age gap between you and the oldest?
I think my oldest cousin just turned 47. I think he's the oldest. I could be wrong. Sorry, Dan, if you're not the oldest one, I just made you sound way like you're older than
Thanks for listening
you
to
are.
Dan.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to Dan, everybody.
Glad you're listening.
Happy
or
birthday.
Watching.
I think
Happy
today's his
birthday if you watch
It
this
isn't
on your
actually
birthday.
your birthday when this airs, but I think it's actually your birthday today when I'm filming.
The thought.
Just
That's
in
why
case,
I know how old he is.
if it's your birthday, if you got that confused too, if it's your birthday when you are listening to this,
Yes.
hey, we nailed it. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
We have to release it 1 year from today.
No
No one's gonna know anything about me for the first beginning of this whole podcast.
We'll get to know Leah. All right, season 3, everybody. We're getting to know Leah for the first time.
But
okay, so yeah,
age
youngest.
gap wise, my sisters are the oldest one is 6 years older than me, and then the middle child is 4 years older than me. And so growing up, I was definitely kind of just chasing them around, trying to be part of whatever the heck they were doing. And same with my cousins. We had kind of a tight-knit group of kids our age, my cousins Amy and Jimmy, and then my two sisters. We would all spend a lot of time together. So I had a lot of close-knit family, I guess I would say. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with my dad's side of the family, mostly because they were all in Ohio. And so that was kind of my dynamic was I was very close with my family and the people around me until everybody kind of started moving away when I was maybe 13, you start getting into the point in life where everybody's like, all right, now we're kind of all doing our own things.
Okay, so what was your experience like being the youngest? Because like for me, as we've talked about on the show before, I'm the oldest of all my siblings and everything. So like
Yeah, very
I
familiar.
feel like I've got a different experience
Of
maybe.
course.
Like
I feel like, and it's really refreshing to be around like different dynamics of that, because I feel like as the youngest, I like basically came into a crowded room. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
felt like I was always shouting at the top of my lungs just for somebody to listen to me talk. And it was kind of hard because when you're the youngest, people are like, shut up, you're being annoying. So
Yeah,
I
okay,
feel like
yeah.
I definitely I kind of came into something that was already so established because I was like the last of my like sort of generation of my family. So it was kind of almost like I felt like stuff was sort of laid out for me. Like there was already sort of
They're like, we've done this a couple times.
yeah. So like my parents were like, I was not only the third child, but I was also the third girl. So I did a lot of hand-me-downs. I had a lot of, just kind of like, we all wore like matching dresses on Easter and like that kind of thing. But that's, I think, having sisters in general. I don't know if that's necessarily me being the youngest that makes it feel that way. But I mean, dynamic wise, I feel like I was still pretty close with, my sisters and my family, but it always kind of, felt like I was like a little bit like reaching to be like, hey, I'm here. Like, can I say what we should do? Or, but.
right. Was any of that ever like, was it comfortable to have kind of like that, the setup of like, hey, everything's kind of laid out for me. I've got the hand-me-downs. I've got like, everyone's got the structure. Like, was it comfortable, or was there ever a point in time where you were like,
I want to do my thing.
Yeah,
like
when can I start being me?
That was probably around like middle school, I would say. It was nice having the groundwork laid though, like being the third kid to like enter elementary school. My oldest sister, I was in kindergarten and she was in like, 5th or 6th grade or whatever. And so I got to go sit in like the back of the bus with like the older kids and stuff. So
some perks. There's some perks in there.
it was like I was never alone where I was. There was always somebody
Yeah.
walking me to the bus stop. There was always somebody there to make sure that I was okay, I guess.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was groundwork was laid, but when it came to like being my own person, we were all pretty different, I would say. Like one of my sisters was really into roller skating. That was like her sport that she did. My other sister was into like karate, and she was like an artist. She was really into drawing and painting and all that different kind of stuff. And then I really kind of clung on more to music.
What a cool set of sisters though, like in what their hobbies are.
Yeah. They definitely, I feel like it's funny because like as adults, they're both moms now, and a lot of their time and energy is like poured into their kids and to, like their lifestyle of living with, with kids. It's like a whole different, it's a whole different, cup of tea. But I feel like it's sad because I don't see them doing as much of it anymore, but every now and then there'll just be a little pop of like my sister that roller skates, she would like teach roller skating randomly, like wherever she was living, like she'd like do beginners classes, or she's really good at crocheting. So like she'll have like a couple things she'll like throw up on an Etsy shop. And the other one that was really into art, she will design stuff every now and then for, people, or, it's like you still see little kind of sparks of those things, which is awesome.
So does that come from like the idea that, I mean, like, okay, all the sisters like had their own thing, all the siblings had their own thing, whatever. Does that come from like, what's parental dynamic like? Because that sounds like it's a very like, hey, what do you like to do?
Healthy.
We're going to support it. Go do it. Like,
my parents are still together to this day. They've always been a very good team as far as like when it came to us, because they were always like on the same page. I feel like, I mean, of course everybody's parents are like, go ask your mom, go ask your dad, because they don't want to deal with certain stupid stuff.
It's the classic.
But like they were never like, I feel like off balance with like, I don't know, like where they fell with stuff. Like it was always kind of like, if I asked them a question together or separately, I knew what answer I would get of like, am I allowed to do this? Or like, those types of things. Like they were always very,
A
unit for sure. And so I also think part of it was like, go burn some energy and get out of my house. You need to do something. But I think being active was always just kind of like an important thing, in our house. So I did gymnastics probably, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade for a year or two, a couple years. And that was like my sport. And that was the thing that I like clung on to as like my thing before I kind of found my actual thing. Because my entire life up until about, middle school, I was very much like just watching my sisters do stuff and going, oh, that looks really cool. I want to do that. And so like, honestly, if it weren't for, my sisters being interested slightly in music as well, I wouldn't have probably ended up in music because we had this like Yamaha crappy keyboard thing that, had all these different samples and stuff on it. It was like just like a random synthesizer.
When you find those as a kid, that's like the jackpot.
Oh my
You can sit there
gosh.
for 10 hours.
My poor parents. I'm like, it was probably so loud and obnoxious and whatever, but like, I mean, my sisters were the ones that were interested and like wanted that. And that was like what I used to learn to play piano. So if it weren't for that, like playing and singing at the same time and all of that different stuff, like I don't know if I necessarily would have found that was like what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So obviously we have an entire like high school episode of
Yes.
this show. But like, what were you like in school? Like, does that like
I was
sibling
kinda-
dynamic carry over at all, or
No,
like?
so my oldest sister was a good student and, she had her like set of friends. My middle sister, she like never really liked school. She always kind of was just like, I'm here because I'm here.
Okay.
And she had also like just like a set of really good close friends. And then when I was going through school, like I've always had my like core group of friends, but I've always been very social. I feel like where I had kind of friends from all over. But I was definitely like, I've always been awkward. Like I'm still awkward in a lot of ways, but I think like I was always like, I don't know, overthinking what I was saying, or, I was a nerd. I'm still a nerd, but like you didn't want people to know that like you were a nerd,
Yeah, not
Like,
back then.
I definitely feel like I was probably in middle school to like, it was probably like 9th grade or something like that, like 8th or 9th grade when I was finally like, I'm done wearing Hollister and I'm done like doing like it wasn't who I was and it wasn't what I liked. And I was like trying to fit into like, I don't know, more like, I feel like I was almost more when you're that age, you're trying to blend in. So I was more like not trying to stand out and be myself and be somebody that people like looked at. I just wanted to be like, please don't look at me.
Yeah, and we
wanna
weren't really
blend in.
given the option. It was just like, these are the stores that I've heard everyone shopping at.
Yeah.
And your parents are cool with that, and everyone else is doing it. So there was
Of
no.
course. Well, and it was at that age, like, so when I hit probably 12, I stopped growing. So the hand-me-downs didn't really fit me anymore.
You're like, I want my own clothes.
Yeah.
And I'll do what I have to do.
I definitely, like, my mom would definitely, like, make up, because I was very into, like, fashion. Like, I remember, so my mom's always been really good at sewing. I remember, like, designing, like, a whole little outfit that had this same, like, some type of fabric. It had like this, like the cuffs of my jeans had this fabric around it, and then the shirt was made, and then I had like a headband, this whole thing. Like
Absolutely.
I was always into that. My mom was very supportive of like any creative endeavors that I had or anything that I wanted to like kind of individualize myself with. So she would take me shopping, but I think I was definitely hard to shop for because I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew that I wanted people to like me.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, okay, so what was that? Because you kind of explained both that, like, you were kind of wanting to blend in, and it wasn't like, everybody look at me. But at the same time, you were that kind of, like, a little bit of an extroverted person or kid, it sounded like.
I
Like,
think
what was that?
it was more like I wanted to blend in the ways of, like, I don't want people to look at me as if I'm weird or different,
Okay.
but I want people to think I'm cool.
Yeah.
But I've always, like, as far as, like, I never, like, I had, like, a little, like, phone book with, like, my friends' names and phone numbers in them. And I would literally, like, I would just turn to a random page sometimes and be like, oh, I'm going to call so-and-so's house and see if they could come over and play. Like, I hung out with kids from all different kinds of groups, I guess.
Yeah.
But, like, I
okay.
always had, like, a best friend that I hung out with. You know, from the time I was in first grade, my friend Molly was always, like, pretty much, like, right there always. But, you know, as you're like in different, you don't have your friends in your class anymore. So like maybe you make friends in that class versus, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So you start kind of, you know, and I always was the kind of person that I valued my friendships and I valued the the people that I had connections with. So I always tried to keep those strong by being like, okay, you know, like, yeah, I'm going to invite all of these people to my birthday party or whatever it might be. So
Right.
I wasn't trying to blend in by means of like, nobody talked to me ever, I'm super introverted. It was more so blend in with like the stuff that was cool at the
Like
time.
a chameleon. Just like, I can be at this table talking about this, and I can go to that table and talk about that.
Yeah, right.
That
But I
makes
was like
sense.
going and buying clothes that like everybody was like, oh, you have to wear Hollister because that's like the only thing that was cool, right? You know, at that time. But when you're, you know, my size, I was like, I'm barely out of limited too.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so we do have the high school episode.
That's
but
true.
one of my favorite parts about the Get to Know Me for Ross's episode is when we talked about like first crushes and like first relationship.
yes.
And we haven't gotten to that nitty gritty stuff. So
Well, so when it came to like crushes, I mean, like girls are boy crazy. I was boy crazy. I feel like my first boyfriend was like preschool. You know, like I was like, this is my boyfriend,
you
and
can
we're gonna be
remember him.
together
Oh,
forever.
yeah.
Well, we reconnected in high school. I didn't not as like anything more than friends, but like
Hallmark movie.
we made the connection that that's who we were because
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, because I had his name
Tattooed on you.
tattooed on me. Yeah.
and then I just woke
Plot
up one day and I was like,
twist.
right, that's what it is.
But we're just
And that's
friends,
why.
but his name's tattooed on me. No, it was funny because I had his name. I think I accidentally ended up with something of his, and I remember his name like being written on it, like his mom like maybe wrote on it or something. Because we all had these, if you went to this preschool, you had the same backpack. Like everybody had the same backpack. We all got one, I think, when like, you know, whatever.
Okay.
And I think
Exclusive.
Yeah.
yeah,
dang.
at least I don't know. All I know is his name was on something that was in my house. So I remember being like, "Who is that?" And I remember it was that bag from that preschool, and my boyfriend's name was Jacob. And I was like, "Oh, so that's his, you know, full name." And then later in high school, I remember it being in choir, and there was like roll call happening, and I heard his name, and I was like, "No way."
Because it's a big school. So
Yeah.
you're like, whoa, long time no
Exactly.
see.
And I didn't want to walk up and just be like, "Hi, did you go to this preschool?" You know, and just be like weird and creepy.
Been waiting for this.
But like many years later, like after we like had been in the same place, you know, we knew who each other were like now as people. I was like, this is such a random question, but like, did you go to this preschool? And he was like, yeah, I did.
Did we kiss when we were 4? Yes or no?
I was like, did we kiss when we were like
Is your
in
name
this
on my
preschool?
wrist?
And he's like,
Yes. Is this your name on my wrist?
and he's like, well, the first girl I ever kissed, her name was Leah, so I
Oh
think
my
that has
God.
to be it, right? And it was just so like wild that it all kind of
Yeah.
came full circle.
God, a little-
And you know, we're still like friends on Facebook, and like I said, it was just kind of like this random thing of like it never like bloomed into anything in high school or anything like that. But I like definitely confirmed that was the same
Yeah,
person.
that's so
That's
cute.
That is actually
So that was like, I
wild.
feel like my like first crush was this boy in preschool. I had many of them throughout elementary school. I had many of them throughout middle school. We all were talking about in Ross's episode where I feel like everybody has like a relationship where like you don't talk to the person the entire day and then you just break up within a week because you're like, I can't
yeah.
live this way anymore. I can't go anywhere. He might be there.
I might run into my partner.
So I had a couple of those. My first real boyfriend, I was like 13, and I was just so apprehensive about like everything because I overplan everything, and I'm still like that. And so I was like, okay, like, is this the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? You know, that kind of thing.
Something like snaps in our brain at like the age 12, and
It
we're like,
literally
this is forever.
And so that was like
Looking
that was
forever.
like the first person that I was like really all about, like first like real boyfriend that like, you know, was like number 1 on my top 8, like all
Oh,
of that
yeah.
kind of thing. So that was like 13, I would say. But my first like real relationship that I would call like an adult relationship was somebody that I met in high school, and we kind of dated on and off through like end of high school, beginning of like college. And that was 2010 maybe, or
What
something
year
like
did you
that.
graduate?
2011.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like 2010, I think, when we like started dating, stopped for a while, got back together, and it was kind of like that because he was going to school out of state, and then after that I had one other serious boyfriend, that was like a couple years long. We lived together, and then I met Nick after that. So, I mean, there have been plenty of like random in-between flings or like things like that. But like as far as like serious relationship goes, I feel like I had like 3 kind of big ones.
Yeah. I mean, didn't speak about them at all, but didn't speak illy either. You weren't not like, let's go over that one.
I feel like is like if we want to get into like nitty gritty, like heartbroken, like that kind of thing, I feel like there was, I'm trying to think like what the first one would have been or like what the worst one would have been. My like worst heartbreak was somebody that like I think I knew was bad for me. It was somebody that everybody around me knew was bad for me, but like everybody has that person where you're like, I'm just gonna do it anyway.
Yeah. Were people telling you, or were people
Yes.
just like weird around you and you were like, I don't care?
No, like my close friends were like, you know that's like not a good idea, right? And I was like, well, you just don't know him like I know
hear
him.
you, but I can fix him.
Yes, exactly. So it was very much like I did feel like it was that I could fix this person, and I've always kind of been that person in relationships. But ultimately, to give it like lots of tea in a small amount of time, I'll just say that it was super toxic. It was super back and forth. There were other people that got involved, and by the end of it, like he ended up like with this other girl that he told me was just a friend and was
Tales
telling
of his
her.
time.
Yeah, right. And so he was also telling her that I was just a friend. And so that was like the thing that like I feel like broke me super hard, like
Yeah.
because that was the person that I was like I don't know, I felt like I was like making all these different like life choices based around the fact that I wanted to be with this person, and it wasn't me being true to myself. It was me being more like so obsessed with making it work and making it happen the way that I wanted it to happen that I eventually like just kind of imploded because I wasn't like doing anything like any justice to myself as like a human being. So
Yeah.
that was like, I would say like the biggest heartbreak that I've probably ever experienced.
Well, lots of growth since then, since you're married with a house and fur babies.
Yeah, no, I mean, so life now is just like, I get to just not have to worry about that anymore. Like, do you remember being like a kid and being like super in love with some boy in your class, and just like I would think about like one day I'm not going to have to worry about it. Like I'm just going to have the person, and then I can like, and then I can focus on me. I don't know why I thought I had to have that person in my life first, but it's nice to be with somebody that genuinely wants me to be the best version of myself and genuinely like pushes me to be the best version of myself, because like there are so many people out there that just want to take from you, and he's just the most selfless person, and I adore him with every fiber of my being.
Do you feel like you relatively early on, like maybe even after that relationship, or maybe when, or you've always been like this, I don't know, when do you feel like you started to identify that whole like self-love aspect being more important than I need this person because this is what we're supposed to do? Because that was me for a while. It was, oh my God, I'm supposed to have a girlfriend, and like all of my worth and my value is in me being with this person, and then blindly kind of being like, this is it. We're together forever, not being happy with myself first.
Yeah.
And then later having to make those changes. Like when did that come for you?
I don't know if it has even really at this point. I think that coming into a world where everything was established and I already had a loving kind of like hug around me as far as like the people around me, a lot of like how we look at ourselves and relationships with ourselves and with others is based on like the relationship that we have from like infantry of like, you know, when we're literally getting that love from our parents. And I was the last one. So I got all the love that I needed from the people that were giving it to me, and I never had to give it to myself. And so
Interesting.
Sometimes there can be like a disservice.
Yes.
If people are always like, you are so great, and you never actually have to prove yourself to yourself.
yeah.
You just think that.
And I've noticed, I don't know when I think I noticed that I don't have really super great self-esteem versus like, I'm a very confident person. I have good self-confidence, but self-esteem is something that I've struggled with because I will always kind of put the value of other people above myself, because I have always been somebody that like in my like family and growing up in my childhood, if I needed love, like I was given love. You know what I mean? I never had to really do soul searching to find it myself. And so I think I always thought, and maybe even still to this day, like if anything ever happened to Nick, I feel like I would probably, obviously, besides the grieving and all of that stuff, like,
Right.
let's just say it was like more of like let's say he magically just like was gone and I never knew he existed. If I was single right now and like this, I have this fear of being alone, I think. And I think I don't like the idea of having to take care of myself fully. You know what I mean? Like I almost feel like I get to put that on somebody else, and it's so selfish to say it that way.
Well, you also are doing the same thing for him. It's just like part of the partnership.
Exactly. But it's almost like I feel like I'm getting what I need from him and not from myself. And so I don't know if I have made that distinction of like, oh, like the self-love thing. Like I'm still working on that. And that I think will be a work in progress for the rest of my life, because I just always was given love when I needed it. I've always jumped, like time in between relationships for me was like
Same.
little to none. Like I would always be like, all right, well,
I love that you're admitting that, because people want to just like breeze past that, but it's not like a personal thing. It's not that like,
no, and
it's not a selfish thing.
And I've always thought like, if you have an opportunity to be happy and somebody is making you happy, take the chance.
Yeah. What's the pause for? Just to be like, even though I am over the thing that I was not, because feelings can change on a dime. We have to wait 5 to 10 business days. Like we can't do
Exactly.
That I would do that to myself when I like was like entering young adulthood and going in between relationships. Like I would like, it would take me a while to get over a breakup, but even like I would almost punish myself via the heartbreak. Like I would be like, no, you're not. You cared so much about her that you're not supposed to care about somebody else.
Yeah.
So I would elongate
like
the
imposter
process.
syndrome.
Yeah,
Oh my
I would
gosh,
purposely
yeah.
elongate my process of, I can't go be with somebody else yet because I need to make sure.
Yeah.
You know, that whole thing. Like, yeah.
I guess another thing about me is I've always had in relationships, like I've always had this like grass is greener complex.
Oh, yeah.
Of like when you're in like high school and you like are talking to somebody or dating somebody, it's like, you know, sometimes it's like a month and sometimes it might be like a couple weeks, and it's just more like flings. And that's why I was saying it's not like necessarily like real relationships. If it's only, you know, a small chunk of time, and maybe if it's important to you, then it is, but all of the little kind of fling things, it was like I'd be with somebody and I would like build them up in my head to be this really amazing person, and or I would change them and fix them into this really amazing person. And then I realized like I should just find somebody that is those things, and I'd be like, oh, the grass is greener, and like maybe I would find that in someone else. And so I would leave the relationship thinking, okay, well, on to the like bigger, better thing that's going to be ultimately like better for me in the long run. Like I learned something from this relationship and I took it, and now I'm going to move on, you know, and try to find that thing that I'm looking for. But then, you know, when you get into real adult relationships, you realize you have to work towards the things that you want. And it's not easy to be like, not that you should change people, but it's not easy to like be with somebody who has things about them that maybe you're not crazy about.
Yeah, the stakes are way higher when you're...
Yeah, and then being able to be like, all right, like, I really love this one thing about them, and this is, like, maybe a minor inconvenience, so, like, realistically, like, this, like, balance is, like, more weighted on the good side of things. You know what I mean?
And also eliminating the idea of perfection.
Oh, my gosh, that's such a big thing for me. So, obsessive-compulsive disorder, perfectionism, those are all things that I feel like I've kind of dealt with my entire life. And I didn't know that's the one thing about my family. We're all very close. We don't talk about mental health, like hardly at all. Not necessarily because
just generational thing.
Yeah. And I think it just never really came up. Like it wasn't just like something that like we talked about a lot. But perfectionism, like to this day, like there are so many things where like today I was doing my eyeliner and I was like, this one goes up a little more and this one goes straight a little bit. The wings were great.
I have been looking at them this whole time. They are perfect.
Because I went back and I changed it. Because one side was like going a little straighter than the other side. So I was like, I have the time. I'm going to go in and fix it because I'll be thinking about it all day if I don't. And so those are the types of things that I still like struggle with as far as like perfectionism and crap like that just like creeps up on you when you're like, oh yeah, like this is good, but it could be perfect.
Yeah. So something that's super interesting to me that you've said is like, and we've already talked about it a bit, but like that idea of like, would you say that you haven't had that moment where you have slowed down and did that self-love focus because of what you were saying earlier? Of like,
no, 100%.
I felt like I received the love, but that's so interesting to me because like, and this is a big assumption and judgment that I'm making, just casting a blanket over people, but like, I don't know. I feel like if someone was like, oh yeah, I've never focused on self-love, I would kind of be like, ooh, I don't know what kind of person you would be, sort of. Like, like you wouldn't be self-aware, but you are incredibly self-aware and incredibly caring and like.
Well, and I think because I had love given to me by the people around me, I always assumed that I should be the one giving to others. You know what I mean? So I'm constantly like kind of handing out my love to other people instead of giving it to myself.
That you don't take it the opposite way where you're just like, I expect it from everyone.
Yeah, I should be continuing to get it because this is how it's always been. Like, yeah, it could have gone that route.
Right.
Like,
well, and being the youngest child, you are kind of like, all right, everybody loves me. Everybody give me love. Like, I deserve it.
Yeah.
For no reason whatsoever.
Right. But that is a pretty amazing thing that you were like, oh, I was loved growing up in this way, and that's what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to give love to those around you.
And so whenever I felt like my cup was empty from pouring into others, I just assumed that it was kind of a reciprocated thing. So I never felt like I needed to fill up my own cup because I had people around me to help. If I'm like, oh, you look so cute today, and then somebody, they're like, oh, thanks, like I love your hair. Girls do that a lot, where we're like talk each other up because I'm like, thank you.
Yeah,
like,
I'm going to give you something back.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of human nature in general, but you see it a lot in like the women's restroom where you're just like, oh my God, I love your purse. Where did you get it? Like, oh, thanks. I love your pants. Like, and then you just start chatting about stuff.
That's where I see it a lot too.
Yeah. When Ross
that's just a joke. I'm not hanging out in women's bathrooms. Just so we know.
So with this, when I hear like lack of self-esteem, for me, it's that I like cannot say no. And I get really upset because I get upset that people put me in the position because they know that I won't say no. So regardless of what they're asking, regardless of the ask, how big it is, how small, I'm like, I'll
people pleaser.
Watch your dog for 6 years.
Yes.
Bring him over.
Exactly. Like people pleasing and not wanting to let people down.
Those are like the catalyst you felt like you got from like.
Sort of, yeah. Because it's also like I have a very big issue with saying no and with setting boundaries in general. And now like that I'm running my own business, I like have to be able to instill those things. Whereas, let's say a year ago, I had somebody that no-showed me 3 times in a row for like a hair appointment. And I couldn't even just get up the courage to be like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm like working on it. And now that I've identified it, I feel like I'm like trying to figure out how to work on that part of myself.
Yeah. So do you feel like this is that moment in time where you're most identifying that like, oh, maybe I haven't been loving myself 100%. As much? Or was there another moment in the timeline that
what? I think, I don't know if, as I've always been very interested in like psychology and like self-help, not self-help books necessarily, things like that, but like the idea that you can fix yourself sort of a thing. And I always thought like, obviously the not being able to say no to people and having like the issue with like, just to put it lightly, just as like being too nice most of the time. And I'm always like, I've always been the person where in my brain, I'm like, well, if that's the worst thing about me, then like, but if I'm not being nice to myself, then that is a bad thing.
I've realized, just because I can see that you're like that, cause I'm like that so much. And it feels harmless because you're like, I'm still always making people happy.
Yes.
But then it turns into like when someone says like wrong information, you don't know how to correct them because that feels mean, or, anything like that. So then you're just like losing these little bits of you where you're like, I should be able to just say this easy thing to speak up that won't hurt anybody. But for so long, we've just been like, whatever you need, whatever you need to hear, whatever you need to feel, that's what we'll do for you.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, when you're giving to other people and you have these kinds of talks with other people, it's like, I could sit there and be like, wow, like you've never just like introspectively looked at yourself in this way. Like you have never sat down with yourself to be like, hey, like what's bothering you? And like, let's go over that until we kind of like maybe sand it down a little bit and it feels a little bit less rough. Like I don't want to say I bury stuff necessarily, but I do think that there are parts of me that thinks like there are other people that have it worse. And so it almost feels like the imposter syndrome of like, I can't really complain. Like I've had a good life, you know, and like people do like help fill me up. So like, do I need to work on me? Like, I guess I never really realized that that was something up until recently that I even like, it was subconscious. I feel like.
Yeah.
I feel like for such a long time, we also don't know what it means to work on ourselves.
Oh my gosh.
We were just told to work and we were all like, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like it's like even with my stuff growing up, like, and we won't dig into that. There's a whole episode for that. But like just like the surface level stuff of like, okay, I was kind of always made to feel like I was wrong, or I was terrified, you know, of an adult in my life growing up and all that sort of stuff. So it made this weird dynamic for me where like I would both be a people pleaser, but also want to just get through to the result so bad.
Yes.
But I wouldn't like stand up for myself necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would sit and I would be like, okay, yeah, like we need to just get to this solution. We need to just get like, can we just solve this problem? But I wasn't confident enough in myself to lead how to solve that problem.
Right.
And
yeah.
then it,
and
you know,
that,
took
I think
way
just
later to
comes
identify
with,
that.
yeah, I think that just comes with time though too. And maybe that's like, you know, me just like as a 30-year-old who is just now figuring out that I have no self-esteem that's talking. But I think like it takes time to become confident in certain things because you have to do it wrong a bunch of times before you're going to be confident that you're doing it right.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, what would look different in your life if you had self-esteem?
I feel like I
Had
don't
more,
actually,
by the way, not like
no,
do that you're completely
and that's
depleted.
the thing is like I think that I ultimately like in my life right now I feel like I'm doing great and I feel happy, and so I'm almost like, could there be more? And it's almost a feeling that there is a part of me that I feel like if I fixed things could be even better, but I don't know almost how to go about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if there's anything specifically about my life that I feel like maybe I would just, like I've gotten to the point now where like, if I'm tired and like people are making plans, I'll just be like, hey, listen, I'm tired. I don't want to go anywhere. I used to be really bad at that and just be like, okay, yeah, changing out of my pajamas back into regular clothes. Like, I'll meet you at the bar, you know.
Yeah, it's really tough to be that person.
Exactly. And I've gotten better at that.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's like little by little. It's like building the confidence to say no or building the confidence to stand up for myself. But I feel like part of like maybe where that was hard for me was in like the, you know, turn from high school to college. You know, it wasn't a question. Like in my house, like my parents said, like, you are going to college, like pick something. And to quote my dad, I think verbatim, actually, he said, I don't care if you get a degree in fucking basket weaving. You are going to have a bachelor's degree. And that was just the way that like,
Now
that
she
was
has
the
a
way
degree in basket weaving.
Yeah. It's great.
professional basket weaver. And so going into school, you know, I wanted to do music. It was the one thing that I was super passionate about and that I cared about more than anything. And so I just thought like, all right, well, I'm going to go to school for this because that's what you do. And when I got to school, I quickly realized that there are other avenues that you can take to do it the way that you want to do it, because every day I was going in and, you know, doing this classical, like opera music, and not that I don't have a place in my heart for that stuff, because I do. But I was doing a lot of stuff that I thought, I don't want to do this every day for the rest of my life. I want to do something different. And I wasn't sure what that was necessarily, but my parents were very adamant that I had to have a degree and I had to stay in school. And it got to a point eventually where like we had a really big kind of blown up fight when I decided I wasn't going to continue going.
So you didn't get a degree?
No, I went for 3 semesters under the umbrella of Cleveland State University as a vocal performance major. And then I decided I wanted to maybe switch to doing audio engineering. So what Nick does. And there was a really, really good program at Cuyahoga, it was Tri-C Cuyahoga Community College, which sounds funny because it's a community college, but they had a lot of really great connections there. I had friends that were doing really well after that program, and I thought, okay, maybe this is the thing. And my parents were like, okay, at least you're like going to school.
There's a reason why you were like, not.
Right. Exactly. And every time I went to go start a semester there or like start the program, my band would leave for a tour. And so I'd go, okay, I'm going to do it when I get back. I'm going to do it when I get back. And then I met Nick, who dropped out of high school and like started recording music in high school and has continued to like make a living and like do it professionally for, 13 years. And he's like, oh yeah, I learned everything on YouTube. And I was like,
right.
What? And that was kind of like, it's funny because he and my dad, I remember it was like Thanksgiving one year or something, had a discussion where, because Nick is very like, unless you're going to be like a doctor or something where it requires like very specific schooling, he's like, I don't think college is necessary. And he and my dad were chatting about it once. And my dad goes, yeah, if I had a kid in high school right now, I'd probably tell them that they don't need to go to college. And I was like, what did you say?
You said at the Thanksgiving dinner table?
Yeah.
Really?
Gosh.
Today.
I was
Of
like,
all days.
I was like, let's chat about that. So it was very much like, that was such a big thing for me where I wanted to set the boundary of, this is my life and I want to do what I want to do with it. But also having like my support system and my, parents. When you're young, you think your parents know everything and that you have to do everything the exact way that they say it because that's the right way to do it. And not that they don't want what's best for you, but like you have to kind of, go down your own path. And so it was like one of those things where like I didn't almost get a say in who I got to be. And I think that kind of maybe had part of it, that lived in me of like, yeah, like what you want and what you feel is important, but like the people around you, like almost, I don't want to say like, is
if you
who
keep
you should
them,
be focusing on.
Yeah. If you keep them happy, then you're happy. So then you get a little bit lost in that.
Exactly.
Well, it goes back to the people pleasing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious cycle and I live in it.
But you somehow like cracked the code, and I don't feel like I know many people that like knew what they wanted to do. You really find that in like creative things that when people stick with it. And to have parents that were like, I know they're musicians too, but you have to go to school.
Yeah.
And you were like, I'm actually going to go tour right now.
Yeah.
When that's done though, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And that's cool because you could have been like, hey guys, we can't tour at this time.
Yeah. And I feel like part of it was that then my band was kind of relying on me.
Yeah.
And so
true.
then it was about not letting them down. And obviously it was what I wanted as well. So it was easier to do it that way too. But ultimately we ended up getting to a point where I was working regularly. I had a job or a career or whatever. Every time that like I left a job, I already had a job. I was never not working. And so they were like, well, if you're not in school, you need to be doing something. And my dad understood kind of the value of wanting to do the music thing because he was a musician as well. And so wanting to go on tour and do all of those things, I think he saw that as like, you got to do that while you're young and while you like can sleep in a van and when you actually enjoy doing this stuff, because he and his bandmates from, his bands when he was in middle school, high school are still very good friends, and they'll get together every now and then and just like kind of play music and whatever. And I can't imagine like looking ahead, to the point where I'm like in my like 50s or 60s or something and like still like wanting to meet up with people and like play music and have that connection. But watching him with his band friends was part of the reason I wanted to do it in the first place.
Yeah, you're like, I want that forever.
Exactly. And so I think he and I had that connection where he was kind of like, okay, like I get what you're doing. And as long as I was working and I could pay my bills and whatever, my parents didn't mind. And they're very much like, they would let me live at home until I had like an opportunity to go somewhere that made sense for me.
Yeah.
Like I moved in with a boyfriend at a time where we had an apartment together. And then within, the first year's lease or whatever, I ended up moving back in with my parents because I was probably like still 21 or something like that. But I always knew I had a place with them.
Yeah.
So, regardless of like the big blown out fight we had over like, what my future was going to look like and stuff, like they've always been, there to help me with whatever it was to like make that future, look
Doing
right.
what they think is best,
Yeah.
as our parents do.
Exactly.
So let's walk through the story arc of music.
Okay.
So like, so you've already mentioned like, okay, I was in a band and I was doing this, and you had that dynamic of like college and all that sort of stuff. But like, let's like, what's the arc of the band look like, or even your like pursuit of music as your like number one thing? Because obviously not that you've gotten rid of it now,
Right.
But like for a while, I would safely assume it was like, this is the thing.
It was, yeah. It definitely was. I would say probably like 7th or 8th grade, I got into singing and playing the piano at the same time. Just because I was like messing with something at home, and I think I always liked to sing, but I was always a little bit shy. I never thought that I would get in front of people because, again, I can be very awkward. And it's funny because looking back at the time when I was on stage, like as a musician, like I can do things that are rehearsed and sing that song and like do the thing. But in between songs, when everybody's tuning and stuff, I'm like, so who likes bread? You know, like I didn't know how to talk to a
Bread.
crowd. Like,
Ever heard of it?
it was just like,
Airline food.
oh my gosh. Yeah. What was it? Forks? Forks?
Anyone ever used a fork in here before?
Yeah. Just like those types of things where like,
Is it like a character you turn on? Because in my brain, I really, romanticize just like a lot of like big creative things like that.
yes.
And you're just a different person up there.
I felt like I was when I was singing, but there was still part of me that like had the imposter syndrome of like, nobody cares about what you have to say right now. Like, you know what I mean? Almost like there was nothing that I could say in that moment where like, if I was super serious, like, thank you guys so much for being here. And we're so like, there's a time and place for that. And I felt like we weren't at the level where I would be like, we're so happy to see you and it means so much that you came out, and it almost feels ingenuine. But if I'm just like, yeah, I got Dorito dust in my eye today, like, I don't know. I felt like if I could just like pass the time in
meet
some
them
way,
where they're
shape, or
at.
form.
Well, I think especially in like entertaining things, there's a difference between having like a character that's an extension of you and
Yes.
playing a character.
Yeah.
That at least for me is like so many of the different
Well-
things that I've done. I'm like, okay, yeah, is this an extension of me, or am I going into the mode
Yeah.
of I am playing this
I
part?
definitely kind of enveloped myself into like being the front woman of my band, where like at one point I even had almost like a persona on the internet that was different like than who I was as a person, who was just more like sassy and confident, and I put the kind of energy out there that I thought like this will make people think that I know what I'm doing and that like I'm confident in myself.
I still think you know what you're doing, but
Well, at the time, I was kind of an asshole on the internet, I feel like. Like, I was the kind of person where, like, I felt like I needed to prove something. So, like, I would get in arguments on the internet with people about stuff. And I still will argue points that I'm very passionate about.
Sure.
But also, like, I feel like I used to be the kind of person that would leave people feeling bad after, like, having an interaction like that, and that's not like who I was as a person. I think it was like, you know, I was in this hardcore scene and I was trying to like, I don't know, be something that I wasn't. And I think at some point it kind of all imploded. Like I keep using the word imploded, but like I definitely was the kind of person that like I wasn't doing work on myself and I wasn't giving that love to myself, and so it would eventually bottle up until a point where it just like wasn't okay anymore. And I had this very confident persona and this very confident like thing that I was putting out. And then eventually it became more of a kind, confident, you know, I wasn't being a dick anymore on the internet like I was at one point. I had a friend that was literally like, I don't like internet, Leah. And I was like, yeah, I know.
you're like, oh, right.
Interesting.
It was like something
Yeah.
that like I openly talked about with like people close to me.
Yeah.
And I think it was like once Leave Earth started touring more, and this was way beyond that point. Like I said, I'd stopped being a dick on the internet, and then I think it was like many years later that like my band started actually like doing things, and I was trying to still at least have that confidence where like I made it look like, okay, she's sophisticated and like graceful and she knows what she's doing. And then I'd get on stage and I'd like trip over something. You know what I mean? Like I was like the kind of person where I would write these songs and people would connect with them and they meant something to me, but then people would come up to me and just be like, oh my God, like I want to talk to you about my entire life. And I'd be like so overwhelmed, like, oh, they think I know how to help them through stuff when I'm still going through this stuff myself. And it got to a point where I eventually like kind of shut down and I wouldn't really go and hang out with people at shows because I was so almost overwhelmed with like the social aspect of having to be the person that I was on stage, like in real life. And so I don't know if I ever like got to be myself like as a musician on a stage, if that makes sense, other than my music. My music was genuine, and the person that like I was like I was becoming more of who I am now. Obviously the whole thing's a journey, but I felt like I had that just like social media like filter on my life where it was like everybody's struggling with something, you know, and I think I was struggling with all of that, but I was like, nope, yeah, I have my shit together. Like,
well, especially because you're like, I want to have a successful thing, but right now in the world, and especially then, it only feels successful if it looks successful online.
Yes. And it was very like, it was also very much like there would be situations where like there was like somebody in the music industry or somebody that was like close knit to people that were like around us a lot in the music industry, where like, especially as like a woman in a band, like people creep you out, or like people say stuff that makes you uncomfortable, or people treat you badly because they don't look at you as an equal. And not to like, my bandmates are my best friends, like love them all to death. I would die for any of them, no questions at any point in my life. But I felt like if I was to confront those things and those people, that I would have been letting them down. Because if it could like put any kind of negative light on us in any way, shape, or form, where it was like, I don't know.
You're climbing up and you're like, if I say this thing about this person that is bigger in the scene, I got to go back down 5 stairs.
And that's the thing is like, I had to kind of just like be pretty and keep my mouth shut and be this person that, you know, other people needed me to be. Not necessarily my bandmates or like the people that like were listening to my music specifically, but like those were like the instances where I could identify like, I'm being this person for these people, kind of a thing.
Which is so interesting because your decision to get into music and be in a band was your
for you
big choice that was for yourself of like,
Yeah.
I could go to college for these things, but nope, I want to go for music or I want to go be in a band. And then to be met with that, like, and that was a whole other layer of you're going to have to decide either for yourself or to impress all of these other people so they think
Yeah.
that you're good.
Well, and not only that, but also like going into like a band versus just doing stuff by myself, like it was very much like, okay, like I need to make sure that the people around me are like getting what they want out of it as well. And it was my first band. And a lot of the time, like if I was even remotely unsure of something, I would just be like, yep, whatever you guys think. Like I would put in my 2 cents, of course. And I would like sometimes make arguments for things that I was very passionate about, like a song title or, you know, something like that. But besides that, I mean, I was pretty much like, I'll just do whatever you guys think. And, you know, if they wanted, like, we were very driven to just try to be successful. I think towards the end of everything, it stopped being fun. Like we stopped like hanging out as friends, and it became like almost like a business thing where it was like, we have to be successful in this, at least like money wise, or else we can't continue to do it. And I think that kind of drove us all like a little bit apart too.
Yeah, once it starts becoming about money, even like that's never what we want, it's what we need.
Yeah, so
it stops being fun.
Exactly. And that's kind of what happened was like I kind of lost myself, and I kind of lost the thing that I was fighting really hard for, because it felt like it wasn't even our band anymore. It was, okay, what's going to sell or what's going to be the most successful. It wasn't, hey, what are we feeling right now, and like what do we want to create together as a group? Because that was the thing is like, you know, I would sometimes be sitting with them, we'd be at a restaurant or something, just like eating burgers, and I'd look around and just be like, nobody would look at this table of people and like realize like what we can do together. You know what I mean? And it was just like, I had that feeling of like almost, you know, when I was a little kid being born into a big family that already was there and established. My band was very much a very similar
So full
thing.
circle, because I was going to be like, did you ever find your people that were like your people and it was your band?
Yeah, no, they 100% are like some of the best people that I've ever met in my life, and I love them all so much. And you know, I I wish that I lived closer, or they lived closer, or that it wasn't such a like long distance that we could spend more time together. Cause that's, now I have FOMO, like as an adult and like not being in the band anymore. It's like, they all still live close enough where like they could hang out every weekend. And I'm like, oh, I wish, you know, like I wish that I was there like to hang and have good times. Cause now I feel almost like, oh, like I feel like the real me now. Like I feel like, oh, like now I can go and hang out and like have a good time.
Yeah.
Because it definitely like, when I was going through the implosion, I like pushed them away in a lot of ways. Like I kind of was like going through it and I wanted to kind of go through it by myself. Cause I was like, nope, you guys can't know that I'm having a hard time with this, because I didn't want anybody to doubt that I like didn't want to like be doing music, or that I, you know, whatever. So it definitely like took its toll on like my relationship with them at that time. So it sucked because I was like, oh, I did. I found my people,
all
but
of the
I felt
self-awareness is there. Like it sounds like
I've had kind of life talks with them since, like individually and as groups, of being like, I'm really sorry because I was a dick and I was going through some shit, and that doesn't give me an excuse, but now at least you kind of know like that I'm sorry for it, at least, you know, like, you know what I was going through, and you know, I can apologize up front and say that I acknowledge that it was happening, because at the time I wasn't thinking anything of like how I was acting or what I was doing, because I was so consumed in just everything that I was feeling.
Sure.
Right.
I cut you off. I'm sorry. What were you going to ask?
No, I was technically interrupting your story.
This is your episode.
This is all about you. So let's talk about like the transition out of like the band, and obviously like you still make music today. You're still involved in like different projects and stuff, but like what was like going through your mind? And it doesn't have to be like a super particular, like, oh, the first year after, but just like in general, I mean, up until now, like what's that sort of been like? To
be honest with you, it took me a really long time to be okay after my band stopped doing stuff, because not only was that like my best friends that I had a group chat where I was talking to them every day and I saw them twice a week and we were, you know, doing all these things together. But not only that, but like I was also like, it felt like you broke up with like four people. Like, so
friend breakups are fucking the worst.
Yeah. And it wasn't like we had a fight or like this falling out or anything. It just kind of dissolved over time. And we had said like, okay, well, so we played our very last show. It was probably almost 5 years ago at this point. We put out our last song 4 years ago, because at one point we said, hey, let's get together and just like write something. And then way later we ended up like finishing it, putting it out, whatever. But it was more about just getting together and spending time together and like having that whole thing. But like, not only did I lose kind of like that connection with my best friends of like, hey, I see you all the time, and hey, I talk to you every day, but also like I lost my creative outlet. So it was like, I had never had to write music by myself. It was always, okay, like you come up with an idea and then, okay, I can run off of that. And you know, it was that kind of thing. And so I needed somewhere to kind of put everything, which is where Pray Tell ended up coming from, which is my solo project, where I kind of just, anytime I have this feeling or like this urge to write something that's me by myself, it's like a Pray Tell song. So it could have a completely different genre, like every single song. It's just whatever I feel like I needed somewhere to kind of put it. And then I've got like other random stuff. Nick and I have like a pop punk thing that we work on sometimes. And it's not the commitment that I used to have.
But does it feel better, like less pressure? When I'm doing it because I want to.
So in some ways, for sure, yeah, because it is fun. Like when I do get into like the creative like mindset of like when we do start working on it, it is definitely like a good time. But it took me a while to get there, because I almost felt like I was like cheating on my band in a way, almost like, oh, maybe someday we'll get back together, like Ross with his girlfriends, you know, where he's like, I'm not going to let go of this because it could still happen. So,
this is supposed to last forever.
Yeah. So I was like the sad puppy dog ex-girlfriend, like of the band that was like, do you guys think we could just maybe, you know, and everybody was so sick of me that they were just like, we can hang out, and like if you want to write something, like yeah, we can like work on something, but like it was never gonna like go somewhere or do anything. And I always thought like if we can just all be in the same place and do this together, like it'll rekindle the flame. And it took me a long time to realize that like we're in different parts of our lives now, and that's okay. And they've been telling me that since day one. Like my drummer, he's like the band dad, and we've had lots of life talks about this. And he's like, I'm like, it just feels like, you know, you're doing this, and, you know, Ben's doing that, and David's doing that, and it just feels like nobody's really whatever. And he's like, yeah, like, and that's okay. Like, it's okay that we're all doing like our own things now. And I'm like,
showbiz, baby.
Exactly. And it took me honestly until probably like, I'm not even kidding, like last year, like this past year, because I would still like, and even to this day, like I have nightmares sometimes of like them all doing something and I'm like just far enough away that I can't take part in it. And it's not even that I need them, like they can obviously make music with whoever they want to make music with, and they can hang out with whoever they want to hang out with.
It's just the morning. Morning.
And it's the part of me that feels like, oh, like what if like they're having this great time and I feel like I'm missing out on it. You know what I mean? And now I've gotten to a point like as an adult human being that I'm like, I have good times and they're not around, and like, you know what I mean? Like, and I can look at them and be proud of them for the things that they're doing and creating, and the stuff that like brings them joy, or the people that bring them joy. You know, it's like we've all had lots of over what, 7 or 8 years that we spent all of this time together, and we were so involved in each other's lives. And it was almost like, I don't know, like I'd be like, I don't know who you're dating, or I don't know like what you know did at work, like, you know, those random little just like anecdotes of like inside jokes and stuff that were just like, I don't know, that I felt like I was wounded without being part of them anymore.
Yeah.
And I think now I can actually like appreciate the fact that like life goes on, and, you know, we're all still on really great like terms with each other, and like we get together for special occasions. And it took me a long time to get there though. Like I was not like fully, I feel like, over it and like willing to give that like, hey, good for you kind of like genuinely until a lot more recently, because I was so upset that like we weren't doing anything anymore.
Yeah. So where, like, I don't know, the classic open-ended question of like, where do you want to go from here? Like, is it, because I feel like, you know, like we talk about like random ideas all the time, and obviously like we're doing this podcast, like this is a fun, creative endeavor.
And this is going to make us famous and rich, so
yeah, obviously
that's fine.
This is the last thing any of us are going to have to do. But until then, you know, is it like, oh, I still want to make music like whenever I want, when like I feel like it?
Yeah.
Or is it like, there's actually like, it's not like my interest isn't just tied up in music now. I want to go do these things. Like as you're finding more of who you are, where do you feel like that's leading you to? Like, what do you see when you're finding that?
What I've realized is there's always going to be a place for music in my life and in my heart and in my soul. And there's always going to be part of me that's creating stuff musically, whether it's, you know, for myself, or if it's, you know, with stuff that Nick's doing with Ingram Audio. I feel like I'm always going to be connected in some way, shape, or form to music, even if it's not like my primary tunnel vision focus item. And so it's shifted a lot to now I'm, you know, doing hair, and that's my career. But I think like as like time has kind of moved forward and just like life happening around me, Ross and I have talked about this actually, but I've thought about going back to school and getting a degree in psychology, because I've felt from a pretty young age, and even now still, I feel like people confide in me very easily, or people seek, you know, something from me in that way. I've had people message me that I don't know at all on Facebook or Instagram or social media in general, who I don't know if they just see me, or I don't know how it happens, but people find me, and I feel like they know that they can talk to me about things, and that I will be, I don't know, in some way, shape, or form helpful. I don't know if it's the vibe that I put out or whatever, but it's something that's happened to me my entire life, and I've always kind of ignored it and written it off as like, well, that was kind of weird, but I'm going to move on with my life now.
You're like, okay, people pleased, and we're on to the next.
Yes. But as like as I start to like, as an adult, want to like work on myself and want to understand myself better and people just generally better, I've thought like understanding the way that the human brain thinks and works and all of that stuff would be so intriguing to me, just because I feel like it would just be like the last puzzle piece that would be like, hey, like this is why things are. This is why we are the way that we are. And this is the thing that, maybe I've been running from all of this time because I didn't realize it was right there in front of me. So that's kind of like, I know we've had sort of a talk about that, but it's something that's kind of been in the back of my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any burning questions?
No,
Brittany?
I learned so much. I've told Ross like 50 times. I was really excited about this episode.
Oh.
To really like get to know you, because you
Yeah.
do give so much to other people and do so much for other people. I could only see
It's the
like
worst.
it's the fucking worst. But yeah, I feel like all my questions were answered, and I think that was a beautiful way to be like, okay, and now where do you go from here? That would be incredible. Whatever comes from that, it's the awareness of like, oh, this is like the meaningful thing I can do to help people.
Yeah. Yeah.
In whatever capacity that ends up coming in.
I think like the cool thing, I feel like a thread that because like I said, I don't really remember like our chat on What You Don't Hear necessarily. So like,
That's
I feel
okay.
like this was like a refresher for me.
Yeah.
But I feel like a thread that I've now uncovered in this is like there's this like idea that I learned years ago that I love ever since I heard it. And it's that whatever you think you don't have, you have something else in its place.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is a lot of what I feel like you've explained in your story, is that yes, you can sit and be like, oh, I don't really have I didn't have a high self-esteem, or I was focused on being a people pleaser, or I was always kind of like just, putting myself into the situations that were given to me, and it was hard for me to find who I was, blah, blah, blah. I still think during that entire time, like I almost said it earlier, and I don't remember what exactly you said that spawned that for me, but like, I feel like there was so much that you were doing that like, yes, we can identify, and this goes for anything, and probably anybody sitting at this table, myself included, that like anything that we can look at and we can sit and we can say, oh, I don't have that. If only I was more confident, if only I had a higher self-esteem, if only I was more creative, if only I had a famous band, if only I had whatever, then I could be that thing, or I could have that thing. When I think that like a lot of the times it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz mentality of like, you had it in you the entire time. And so I think you can look at things of like, okay, you might not have that. That's okay. We can work on that. Hopefully, maybe we get that if we really identify we need it. But what we don't have in that space, there's something else that we do have. There is something else that makes us unique, that makes us special, that makes up for that thing that we think is lacking, when actually we're not really lacking at all. And that doesn't mean that we can't get better. It doesn't mean that we can't grow and look to change and add those things to ourselves.
Right.
I would love to understand the grass is greener complex. Like, I feel like everyone has it, and I would just really love to know.
Well, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that everybody's main thing, like if you ask anybody, like if you could have one wish come true, like, or like whatever, it's everybody just wants to be happy. And I think that like right now in my life, like I feel like I'm very happy, like, and I can acknowledge that I'm very happy because of the fact that like I've been in places in my life where I've not been happy. And I think that there's always going to be this mentality of like, okay, how can I make it even better? You know what I mean? Instead of sitting there and being like, wow, you know what's really cool is like, I get to do like this really awesome podcast with my friends, and I get to play D&D on Fridays, and I get to make music because I have a studio like literally on my property, and I get to have as many animals as I want living in my house. Like I can fully look at like the situation that I'm in right now and say, I am happy. But there's always going to be something where it was like, but what if I did that one thing like,
But in an
5 years ago?
reality.
What if, would I be as happy or happier like if my band was still doing stuff? Or would I be happier if I like switched to, a different career path like psychology? Like, would I be way happier if I lived somewhere different? There's always going to be burning questions because that's just being a human in general.
Yeah, and I think that comfort from, like, you can be happy but not be like comfortable with your happiness, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think that comfort of being happy comes from when we can identify that, like, we can make progress and be moving forward, but not doing it as the chase.
Yes.
Because for so long, we're always chasing.
Yes.
Oh, if I can just get to this, if I can just make this, if this can just be successful, blah, blah, blah. I did that for you. You know what I mean? I would just grind and hustle and every day and all this sort of stuff. I would chase. And once I have this, I'm going to be happier. But when we can learn that, like, we don't have to slow down or stop. It doesn't mean that we're not growing once we can identify, no, I like what I have right now. I think that's a way healthier way to make actual progress, not say, I could be happy with this, but I'm missing this thing still, and I don't like it. So it's the constant chase, the need for more, the grass is always greener thing. Like, I think there's something to be said of, like, when you can find that happiness of, like, you can identify, like, hey, cool, nothing's ever going to be perfect, and so we have to stop chasing that.
And no person is ever going to be perfect.
No.
So yeah, maybe I don't, like, have great self-esteem and I'm working on it, but also, like, I'm never, even if I achieve that, there's still going to be other flaws that I have. Like, I might think that that's, like, my biggest thing, but other people might look at me and be like, does she even know that she's like that? You know, like, I think no matter what, there's always going to be something about you that is, I mean, we would all, if we were all perfect, so to speak, then we would all be exactly the same. And we can't all be exactly the same, obviously. And same with situations. Like, you could do the exact same thing as, like, some other person. You could write the exact same song, you know, and change the words, and you won't be successful because that already exists. Yeah. And I think that that's such a big thing, is, like, there's happiness to be found in the things that surround you. And if you choose to look at those things, you're going to be living a way better, like, happier lifestyle than if you were like, oh, well, so-and-so has this and I want that. And so how do I get that?
Really, at the end of the day, like, it could all end at any point in time, guys.
I know.
And so, like, to be able to be, like, in your backyard with all of your animals and being like, this is it right now, this can be it.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I want right now.
One day I'll probably be, like, old and I'm gonna have, like, a bad leg or something, and I'll be like, man, remember when I was young and I could just, like, run through the grass with my dogs?
Remember why I have this bad leg now is because I did the worm on that cruise ship forever ago.
My
a story
hurts.
that you can hear in another episode of the time that Leah
I think about that.
her kneecap.
I literally think about how, like, probably I'm gonna have, like, a bad knee, and if there was ever a zombie apocalypse, how I'm literally gonna
like,
be the
you
person
literally threw yourself out of the ringer.
Wait for me.
Gosh.
I have one final question if you don't have anything.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm actually going to steal one of my closer questions from what you don't hear.
Okay.
Because I really want to hear your answer. Because I didn't ask it to you way back when we recorded.
You don't remember the episode.
Well, yeah, okay, but I do remember that I wasn't asking this question at that point. So right now, I want you to pretend like future you shows up in a portal right now. They show up and she's talking to you. What would you hope that she would tell you? What would you hope that she would share with you?
I would hope that, and I just because I know that myself, if I went back in time and I was telling younger me this, I think that I would just mostly hope that I would come back and say it gets better, or it stays good, or, like, you're gonna make it. You know what I mean? Kind of just, like, just the reassurance of, like, yeah, life's hard, but, like, we're doing it. Like, we're going through the motions and we're doing it, and it's not always gonna be easy, and there are gonna be days where you feel like you've never been in a worse state of mind, but we're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's worth doing. And if it's somebody that came back, let's say if I came back 20 years from now, I would hope that I would just be like, hey, you know, it's fine. It's going to be all right. Like, you're on the right path. Like, you're going to do great things, and, like, just let yourself believe that you can do it and that you can make a difference by doing it. And let that just be the thing that makes you move forward in your life. Because I think I get caught up a lot in, like, the present. And I don't think a lot about, like, oh, how is, like, future me in 20 years going to benefit from, like, what I'm doing right now. It's more so about, like, okay, right now in this moment, like, am I okay? Is everything okay? And how do I make it okay or better? And I would hope that somebody came and just said, it's going to be okay.
It's
or
good,
better.
girl. Enjoy your life.
You're
Take care.
You're doing all right.
And she doesn't
We're a
show
millionaire.
Up, she doesn't show up with a peg leg.
And she doesn't show up with a peg leg. Hopefully she's wearing Gucci, or I can tell she's
right.
balling.
Yeah, she just like drives her car through the portal.
She shows up and says, "Stop doing the podcast now!
Yeah.
Don't
waste
say what you're about to say.
You don't know what you're doing." That was super fun.
Yes, I love that cup filling every time.
I absolutely love that we got to do that.
Yeah.
Technically for the second time, but for the first time.
With me,
with
yes.
all three of us
Yeah.
getting to sit down. Brittany, do you feel like you got to know Leah a lot better?
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. Thanks for doing that. And you really, you got into some like deeper stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a blast.
I'm trying to give like give more of myself to feel like the vulnerability is actually there. Cause I'm like, I could sit here and be like, oh, I was born here on this date, blah, blah, blah. But like the actual, like the feelings of things that I had or like things that happened to me, I'm like, no, that's the shit people are coming here for. They're like, let's hear about that time that, you know, in the 7th grade, they found out she was wearing a thong.
We skipped over that story.
Yeah, we for sure
We did. No, we did.
second.
That's
It's a
good.
deal.
Part of the Patreon.
Yeah.
Except for maybe not 7th grade thong stories in the Patreon.
The thing is, people are going to think we have a Patreon because every episode we joke about the story being exclusive on the
We
Patreon.
don't actually, you know what? If you can find it, good for you.
yeah.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
I don't know who you're giving money to, but
yeah,
they
actually, someone
deserve
starts
it at
one
this
for
point.
us.
If you could, someone out there is probably, by the time this episode's out, someone is actively taking money for us.
Yes,
which
on our
means they're
Patreon.
taking money from us. Well, audience, you can't answer me right now, but this is where I would ask you, hey, do you feel like you got to know Leah a lot better? Because I think you did. Leah, if they want to continue to get to know you even better, or they want to DM you like you said that people often do, or talk to you about any of this stuff, where can they find you on the internet?
Typically, I'm answering most on Instagram, and my @ is LA dot petite PETITE goth GOTH.
Beautiful. Do we promote ourselves on this episode?
Yes, you should. Let's tell the people where to find you
See,
guys.
so selfless. She said, absolutely. My episode is your episode.
Let
Do
them
it.
talk to you guys. I can't say no. They'll be messaging me at 2 a.m. and I'll be like, it's fine.
Yeah, you're like, there's a couple people from the podcast. Can we divvy that work up?
Well, if you are looking to message somebody at 2 a.m. and wanting a response,
that
I'm
one.
your guy.
You're the one that's up late. That's
I'm
true.
your guy. You can find me at Ross Tyson. Brittany, where can they find you?
You can find me between the hours of like 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. HAIBRITTANI.
And most importantly, you can find this show at Honestly Same Pod. Wherever you're listening to this at, make sure to hit that MF and AF subscribe and follow button. Do it. If there's a Patreon, go send money to it, but confirm with one of us that you're sending
Yeah,
money to us
please.
first.
Do
Please
it.
do that. Guys, this was so much fun.
Yeah.
We did it. That was a Leah episode.
Yay.
Woo! Hit the button.